Have you ever jolted awake in the early hours of the morning, somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m., wondering why your body won't rest even though you're exhausted? You glance at the clock and think, why now? What's wrong with me? But what if I told you it's not restlessness at all? What if that moment, yes, that exact moment when the world is silent and the night holds its breath, is not random but sacred? What if it's the universe or God Himself tapping you on the shoulder, not to disturb your sleep, but to awaken your spirit? This isn't about insomnia. This is a divine invitation. And what you choose to do in those quiet hours can mark the difference between a life that drifts and a life that dominates destiny. Recognize the wake-up call as a divine prompting. Waking up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. isn't always about your body being tired or your mind being restless. Sometimes it's not even about what's going on in your physical environment. No, it's deeper than that. It's spiritual. It's sacred. It's divine. This is the hour when distractions are at their lowest, when the noise of the world fades into a whisper and the voice of purpose grows louder if you dare to listen. You're not just waking up, you're being summoned. Summoned to clarity. Summoned to breakthrough. Summoned to align your spirit before the world starts spinning again. Many people treat those early hours as inconvenience. They toss and turn, grumble, or numb the silence with their phones. But what if you could learn to recognize that moment for what it truly is? A divine prompting, a personal encounter set aside just for you. Because make no mistake, when the heavens want your attention, they don't always shout in daylight, they whisper in darkness. They stir your heart at 3:17 a.m. They wake you gently but persistently because they know that in those quiet moments, your heart is finally still enough to listen. There's a reason so many breakthroughs, ideas, and revelations come in the early hours. There's a reason why warriors rise before dawn. There's a reason why prophets and visionaries through history have been awakened in the stillness. Because when you are least distracted, you are most connected. And in that sacred space, there is clarity you can't buy, strength you can't fake, and direction that changes your entire day, sometimes your entire life. You have to stop treating that moment as accidental and start seeing it as intentional. You're not being interrupted, you're being invited. And every time you ignore the call, you delay the growth. Every time you go back to sleep without responding, you miss the chance to step into a higher version of yourself. You're being nudged by something greater, not to punish your rest, but to awaken your purpose. Because that divine wake-up call is more than spiritual. It's strategic. It's often when your mind is free from the stress of daily noise. It's when the Spirit speaks without needing to compete. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that what felt like just waking up is actually the beginning of a conversation with destiny. And it's not always a booming voice or a dramatic vision. Sometimes it's just a gentle reminder that you're alive for a reason, that your journey isn't random, that there's more in you and it's time to rise. There are people who will sleep through their calling for years, not because they're lazy, but because they're unaware. They think those early awakenings are meaningless when in fact they are the most meaningful part of their day. They go back to bed without realizing that heaven had a message waiting. Don't let that be you. The world needs you awake. Your purpose needs you engaged. Your legacy needs your focus. But none of that happens until you start answering the call. Imagine what your life would look like if every time you woke up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., you didn't resist the moment, you embraced it. You opened your heart instead of your social media. You chose prayer instead of panic. You chose reflection instead of frustration. You stepped into the spiritual instead of slumping into the physical. You spoke life into your dreams when everyone else was still dreaming. That's what separates the driven from the drifting. That's what turns ordinary mornings into divine movements. So the next time your eyes open and the room is still dark, don't reach for comfort, reach for clarity. Don't roll over, rise up, because your future might just be waiting for you between 3 and 5 a.m. And if you treat it as holy, it will reward you with more than rest. It will give you revelation. And revelation will always take you further than sleep ever could. Respond with purpose, not panic when you find yourself awake between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. You have a choice, a powerful life-altering choice. You can respond with irritation, questioning why you're being robbed of rest. Or you can respond with intention, stepping into a moment that may have been divinely designed for your transformation. See, too many people panic or get annoyed when their sleep is interrupted. They scroll, they sigh, they toss and turn, not realizing that what they are treating as a problem is actually a portal. a spiritual gateway into deeper awareness, breakthrough, healing, or clarity. The difference between those who move forward in life and those who remain stuck often comes down to how they respond when no one else is watching and the world is still asleep. Let's be honest. In those early hours, it's easy to let your thoughts spiral. It's quiet, and that silence can feel deafening when fear creeps in. Maybe your mind replays every mistake you made yesterday. Maybe anxiety starts whispering about tomorrow. Maybe doubt creeps in, asking, "Are you even doing enough?" These moments can feel like warfare inside your head, and if you're not grounded, panic can take over. You lie there, frozen in thought, feeling helpless and alone. But this is where your power begins, because you don't have to let your mind wander into fear. You can anchor it in faith. You see, your response determines your result. If you respond with distraction, you miss the lesson. If you respond with fear, you block the flow of peace. But if you respond with purpose, if you say, "I didn't wake up by accident. There must be something I need to hear, something I need to release, something I need to do," then you step into alignment with your greater calling. That's not wishful thinking. That's spiritual strategy. That's the kind of mindset that reshapes your identity and redefines your day before it even begins. So what does it look like to respond with purpose? First, it means stillness, not struggle. Take a breath. Be present. Ask yourself, what is trying to rise up in me right now? Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's conviction. Maybe it's a dream you've been ignoring. Often, these quiet hours reveal the things we bury during the business of the day. That's why you must meet them with awareness, not avoidance. This is the time to tune into what's happening beneath the surface of your soul. Second, it means choosing connection, not to the internet, not to your problems, but to God, to purpose, to your inner voice. Start with a simple act of gratitude. Just thank God for waking you up. Even that small gesture shifts your energy from frustration to focus. From "why me?" to "thank you for trusting me," because that's what's really happening. You're being trusted with a moment that others sleep through. And if you steward it well, it can become the very foundation of your transformation. And then speak, not randomly, but deliberately. Speak life over your circumstances. Declare that today will be a day of progress. Claim healing, clarity, strength. This doesn't have to be loud. You don't have to perform. But you do need to be intentional. Words have power. And when spoken in faith in the early hours, they echo louder than they would during the day. That's the moment when your spirit is most sensitive, your heart most honest, and your mind most open. It's not about emotion. It's about alignment. Sometimes responding with purpose also means writing. Journaling what's on your heart. Writing down the ideas that surface when your mind is finally still. So many books, inventions, ministries, and movements were birthed in the early hours of the morning. Not because the person was trying to be productive, but because they were willing to respond when inspiration came knocking. If something stirs in you during those hours, don't ignore it. Capture it. It might just be the seed of your next chapter. And don't overlook the power of silence. Purpose doesn't always require action. Sometimes it requires attention. Just sitting in stillness, breathing, opening your heart to whatever needs to rise to the surface. That is a sacred act. In those moments, healing happens. Vision is restored. Priorities shift. Your pace slows down so your purpose can catch up. You may not even realize what's changing in you until days later. But rest assured, every purposeful response sows a seed in the soil of your soul. You don't need to understand everything to respond in faith. You just need to show up. You just need to say yes. Yes to the moment, yes to the silence, yes to the stretching. Because when you begin to treat those early awakenings as opportunities instead of inconveniences, your life begins to shift, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in deep, steady ways that align you with your highest calling. Let others sleep, let others scroll, but you rise, not just physically, but spiritually. You rise into purpose, into awareness, into the version of yourself that is no longer waiting for life to happen, but is actively engaging with destiny in the stillness of the morning. Reset your mind and spirit for breakthrough. The hours between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. are not just a time to pray, reflect, or be still. They are a sacred window to reset your entire being. These early moments are like spiritual soil, quiet, undisturbed, fertile. And how you sow into them determines what kind of harvest you'll reap throughout the day, the week, and even the years ahead. While the world sleeps, you're being handed an opportunity not just to wake up, but to recalibrate your mind, refresh your spirit, and realign your focus with what truly matters. This isn't about routines or rituals. It's about deep transformation. It's about unlocking the kind of mental clarity and spiritual strength that empowers you to live, not just survive. When you're up in that stillness, when everything else around you is hushed, you can finally hear the inner voice that often gets drowned out during the chaos of your daily life. This is the moment to ask yourself hard questions and sit with honest answers. What am I allowing to take up space in my mind? What thoughts have I entertained that don't serve my purpose? Who or what have I given emotional power to that keeps pulling me backward? These are questions most people never stop long enough to ask, because once the sun rises, it's easy to get caught up in obligations, notifications, and distractions. But before all that noise begins, you have a gift, a head start, a reset button, and how you use it will shape everything else. Resetting your mind in this sacred hour starts with releasing mental clutter. You know the kind. Worry about things you can't control, regret about things you can't change, fear about a future that hasn't even happened. These thoughts don't just waste energy, they drain your faith, they rob your peace. But when you take time in those quiet hours to consciously let go of what's weighing you down, you create room for strength, strategy, and vision. You silence the voice of anxiety and make space for the whisper of wisdom. But it's not just about emptying your mind, it's about filling it back up with truth. Start speaking life, not based on how you feel, but based on what you know. Remind yourself who you are and what you're called to. Declare that no matter what yesterday looked like, today you rise with purpose. Your words shape your world. And when you speak power into your mornings, you begin to reprogram your thinking. Instead of waking up dreading the day, you begin to wake up dominating it, because your mindset has already been molded in the presence of peace. This reset is also about your spirit. Maybe you've been feeling stuck or spiritually dry. Maybe it's been a long time since you truly felt connected, strong, and led. But that's exactly what this window is for. It's not too late to rekindle your fire. It's not too late to return to your source. When your spirit feels heavy or distant, these early hours offer the perfect space to realign. Talk to God not with polished words or religious phrases, but with honesty. Tell Him your fears. Ask Him for help. Invite Him into your day. There's something powerful about seeking divine alignment when the world is still. It's as if heaven leans in a little closer, not because it wasn't there before, but because you're finally still enough to notice. And the truth is, when your spirit gets realigned, your decisions begin to change. Your reactions shift, your patience deepens, your clarity sharpens. You stop being tossed by every little wave because your anchor is set early. You begin to notice that things that once triggered you no longer hold the same power, not because your circumstances changed, but because you changed. In the quiet hours, you chose to reset instead of react. This is not just about what you do in those hours. It's about who you become through them. That version of you, the one who takes charge of their mornings, who leads their thoughts instead of being led by them, who walks into the day spiritually prepared and mentally focused, that version of you is a threat to mediocrity. That version of you doesn't shrink back when life gets hard, doesn't collapse when pressure rises, because they've already been filled and fortified before the sun even came up. That's how champions are made. Not in front of cameras, not on stages, but in silence and stillness, in surrender between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Don't underestimate what this reset can do. This is where confidence is born, not the fake kind that depends on applause, but the deep, quiet kind that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. This is where direction gets clearer, where bitterness turns to forgiveness, where fear begins to fade because you've chosen to meet the morning not with worry, but with worship. And in doing so, you're not just getting ahead of your day, you're getting ahead of the enemy, of distractions, of everything that's been trying to steal your focus. Resetting in these early hours doesn't require perfection. It doesn't demand long prayers or flawless habits. It simply calls for presence, to be available, to be willing, to say, "Here I am, Lord, speak, guide, shape me." Because when you enter your day from that place, when you begin your hours anchored in peace and filled with purpose, you become unshakable. So now I want you to see with new eyes what you once brushed off as inconvenience or random disruption. That moment when your eyes open between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., that is not a mistake. That is not your body failing you. That is not just another sleepless night. That is an invitation, a holy interruption, a sacred knock at the door of your spirit asking, will you rise? Will you respond? Will you realign? You are being awakened not just from your sleep, but from your slumbering potential. You are being stirred not just for a moment, but for a mission. In those hours when the world lies quiet, Hagin leans in, waiting to see who will answer the call. The tired may go back to bed. The distracted may reach for their phones. But the called, the committed, the courageous, they rise. They choose prayer over panic, purpose over passivity, stillness over scrolling. They whisper declarations into the darkness and plant seeds of breakthrough into the soil of silence. You were never meant to sleep through your transformation. You were never meant to wait until life got less chaotic to pursue your growth. No, your growth begins now, in the dark, in the stillness, in the obedience to respond to a moment that most people miss. So the next time you wake up in those early hours, remember this: it's not an accident, it's a divine appointment. Recognize it. Respond to it. Reset in it, because the decisions you make between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. are not small. They are spiritual acts of war against fear, apathy, and delay. They are how you claim territory over your thoughts, your spirit, and your destiny. Champions aren't built in front of crowds. They're built in the unseen places, in quiet moments of surrender, in early hours of alignment, in consistent obedience to a higher calling. And if you dare to rise when others sleep, if you dare to tune in when others tune out, if you dare to meet God in the silence before the storm, you won't just change your day, you'll change your life. So rise, warrior. The world is still sleeping, but your purpose is wide awake.